This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us for the FY22 HMIS Data Standards Training. This training is being provided by the Homeward Community Information System HCIS admin team and is being presented for all users of the HCIS system. This includes users from the Balance of State, Greater Richmond Continuum of Care, the Fredericksburg Regional Continuum of Care, and the Western Continuum of Care. This training is required for all HCIS users regardless of project type and funding source. In this presentation, we'll be covering the FY22 HUD HMIS data standard changes, as well as how these changes will affect data collection and data entry. This training assumes that all attendees have been trained in general HMIS data collection processes and data elements and will not cover HUD standards in detail, but rather provide technical assistance to adequately prepare users for the changes made in this year's data standards revision. For additional training on HMIS and the data standards in general, please reach out to your HMIS lead for assistance. We do have the capacity to have chat during the webinar. Please remain muted until the end. We will have a portion for questions, but feel free to use the chat box for any questions that you have during the presentation. So before we get started into the actual material, we want to take a minute to introduce the HCIS admin team who will be tag teaming the presentation today. We have with us today Ara from the Balance of State. Ara, do you want to say hi?
Good morning, everyone.
Thank you, Ara. For the Greater Richmond Continuum of Care, Homeward is the HMIS lead for that, and we have a couple of their staff on board. Margot, do you want to start off by introducing your staff?
Hey everybody, I'm Margot. Good to see everybody this morning. Kavita, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, this is Kavita. Nice seeing everyone. I hope this is good enough for you all, and good morning.
Good morning, everyone. This is Natasha Johnson. Nice to see everybody.
And Marissa.
Good morning, I'm Marissa. It's good to see everyone here. Thanks for fielding all my emails.
Thank you. And then for Fredericksburg Regional Continuum of Care, George Washington Regional Commission is the lead agency, and myself, Sam Shukis, is the contact for that continuum. And then from Western Continuum of Care, Harrisburg Redevelopment Housing Authority, we have Anton. Anton, do you want to say hi?
Hello, everybody. Anton here from the Western Virginia Continuum of Care. It's nice to see all your smiling faces this morning.
Great, thank you so much. We also want to thank all of our users from the COCs who were able to join us today on this call. The call will be recorded and made available to those who are unable to attend. Those will be distributed by the respective HMIS leads after the presentation. I will now turn it over to Margot to get us started on the material.
Great. All right. So we're going to start off by giving a little bit of background on the data standards. So the Homeless Management Information System is the data system used to record and analyze service and housing data for individuals and families who are experiencing homelessness or who are at risk of homelessness. Local continuums of care decide what HMIS system to use to comply with federal regulations, and all users on this call are a part of the Homeward Community Information System, or HCIS as we call it. The HMIS data standards are established by HUD, the Department of Veterans Affairs, the Department of Health and Human Services to allow for standardized data collection on homeless individuals and families across the system. HMIS data helps us understand who we are serving better. Because HMIS has the capacity to integrate data from all homeless service providers in the community and to capture basic descriptive information on every person served, it is an invaluable resource for communities. HMIS data is powerful because across the country, communities follow HUD's HMIS data standards and the data dictionary. All agencies taking part in HMIS must follow these basic standards. That way we can compare apples to apples and not apples to oranges. HMIS also provides data from across the country. Collecting accurate data consistently allows us to contribute to this national perspective. Here's data from the most recent 2020 Annual Homeless Assessment Report, or AHAR. The AHAR is delivered to Congress every year, and it is HMIS that makes this data possible, and this is just one reason that data matters. Though all of us use HMIS data standards because of federal regulations, I want to highlight that beyond regulation, there is so much going on with community data. HMIS data helps communities learn more about the characteristics of those who are experiencing homelessness and understand what is working in the community and what is not. Data can help providers and stakeholders work towards their goals as they measure outputs, outcomes, and impacts. When we all contribute data consistently across our regions, we learn more about our communities. The bottom line is that your data collection can have a significant impact. HUD updates the HMIS data standards every few years to improve its ability to collect and analyze gaps in homelessness services across the nation. Better data collection means better data analysis and better systems for moving people from homelessness to housing. The data standards were last updated in June of 2020, and the fiscal year 2022 HMIS data standards, which is what we're talking about today, become effective on October 1st, 2021. WellSky, which is our service point software vendor, will implement these new data standards into a first iteration for our community to build off of. The HMIS administration team, who were introduced at the beginning of this call, will then ensure that the correct assessments are available for each project to use within our system to include the updated information and any local questions that may be used by community end users. Changes to Service Point will not be totally apparent to end users until the corresponding tables and data fields are updated by the HCIS administration team. Once the changes have been updated, the HCIS admin team will communicate this information to all end users. Please note that there may be a specified period that users may not be able to use the system, but advance notice will be given for this downtime. The HMIS admin team will do our best to ensure that this does not interfere with any scheduled case management or reporting needs. On May 7th, 2021, HUD released the fiscal year 2022 HMIS data standards. Since then, WellSky has been working to make changes to the system and prepare for the live date on October 1st, 2021. Today, we're offering training on the new standards. For those that are not able to attend, we will have the resources provided, and it is the assumption that the recording will be attended or viewed by all end users by September 24th, 2021. WellSky will have updates ready to go around September 30th, 2021, and new data standards will be used starting October 1st, 2021. There may be a slight delay in the update of the system to accommodate end-of-year reporting for supportive services for veterans' families projects, but this time frame is the implementation estimate. All data standard materials for fiscal year 2022 are posted on the HUD Exchange. And now we will discuss the actual changes that are in the fiscal year 2022 data standards. Marissa will walk us through these changes.
Thanks, Margot. So universal data elements, what are they? They are elements that are required to be collected by all projects entering into HMIS regardless of funding source. UDEs are the basis to producing unduplicated estimates for the number of people experiencing homelessness, accessing services from homeless assistance projects, basic demographic characteristics of people experiencing homelessness, and patterns of service use, including information on shelter stays and homelessness over time. This is the list of universal data elements. All the universal data elements on the left are those that are collected once per client, as they are usually demographics that do not change. Those on the right are those that must be collected once per project stay. The UDEs highlighted in green, race, ethnicity, and gender, have been revised in the fiscal year 2022 data standards, and that's what we're going to discuss now. So for race, there were revisions made to race descriptions and labeling to provide more inclusionary and representative language for all demographics. The purpose of the race data element is to indicate clients' self-identification of one or more out of 5 different racial categories. It is important to maintain this data, that this data is self-identifying and should not be assumed. Allow clients to identify as many racial categories as apply, up to 5. When enrolling a client who already has a record in HMIS, verify that the race information is complete and accurate, and correct it if it is not. Staff observations should never be used to collect information on race. Provide all options to every client and allow the clients to choose. Even if staff believes they can guess a client's race, every client must be asked for their self-reported information. This data element can be challenging to separate from ethnicity. For example, some people of Latin American descent often indicate that their race is Hispanic and would not be referred to in casual conversation or seen in their communities or by themselves as white or Black or African American, as an example. Unless the person is from an original peoples group that is Indigenous or American Indian, in which case they would select that option, the staff will have to ask follow-up questions to ascertain the best response for race. Staff may ask something like, do you know if your ancestors were originally from a country like Spain, somewhere in Africa, or are you part of an indigenous group? The response is tied to where their ancestors came from, not necessarily where they were born or lived during their lifetime. Projects are cautioned against using or providing a default answer. It is important to ask about all household members' race and identity because it is impossible to tell just based on a person's appearance or name. If the client does not know their race or ethnicity or refuses to disclose it, use client doesn't know or client refused rather than making an appearance or name-based assumption. Do not, as a data quality person, do not use data not collected. Revisions made to race descriptions and labeling have been made to provide more inclusionary and representative language for all demographics. Here are the key changes to note. The options are now American Indian and Alaskan Native, and this now includes Indigenous. Asian now includes Asian American as well, and Black or African American now includes African. Now we'll talk about ethnicity. Revisions made to ethnicity descriptions and labeling were made to provide more inclusionary and representative language for all demographics. The purpose of the ethnicity element is to indicate clients who do and do not identify themselves as Hispanic or Latino or Latinx. Again, please maintain that this data is self-identified and it is the self-identified ethnicity of each client served. Staff should not help the client select the ethnicity that they most identify with. Staff should help the client select the ethnicity that they most identify with. Staff should not assume the ethnicity that they believe the client identifies with. When enrolling a client who already has a record in HMIS, verify that ethnicity information is complete and accurate and correct it if it is not. Staff observation should never be used to collect information on ethnicity. Even if a staff person believes they can guess a client's ethnicity, every client must be asked for their self-reported information. No documentation is required to verify a client's response. It's just up to their self-identification. The key changes to ethnicity are the Latino, Latina, and Latinx are now all options instead of just Hispanic or Latino. All right, gender, the last one. HUD's changes to gender description and labeling reflect more inclusivity regarding a client's self-identification and is allowing for up to 5 selections instead of just 1. The multi-select pick lists contain these new selections that you can read on the right. The purpose of the gender data element is to include client self-identification of one or more of the gender categories. Gender identity is a person's internal prescription of themselves and may not match the sex that they were assigned at birth. This data element 3.06 is asking about gender identity and not sex assigned at birth. Staff should be sensitive to people who do not identify as female or male or as transgender. Staff observations should never be used to collect information on gender. Provide all options to every client and allow them to choose. Even if a staff thinks they can just guess a client's gender, every client must be asked for their self-reported information. If they refuse to give it or say that they don't know, do not select anything other than client doesn't know or client refused on the client's behalf. Again, do not use data not collected. Gender does not have to match legal documents, and clients may not be asked about medical history or other information to try to determine the person's gender. Simply asking which of these genders best describes how you identify is appropriate and focuses on the person's own internal knowledge of their gender. The availability of these options is not intended to indicate that transgender individuals are expected to disclose their status. Each response is provided as an option, in case an option or more than one option are better suited to a client's preferred terminology, needs, or situation. Clients may select as many responses to the gender field as they would like to, up to 5, for the person's identified or for the person's preferred identity, need, or situation. However, a response of client doesn't know should not be used interchangeably with the response option questioning. Questioning is about exploring one's gender identity. Client doesn't know should only be selected when a client does not know their gender from the options available, including questioning. Additionally, client doesn't know, client refused, and data not collected are not valid in conjunction with any other response. If a client discloses being transgender, staff should ask if the client prefers to have the HMIS record reflect the client's transgender status. For instance, if a client identifies as transgender male, but they do not want their transgender identity recorded in HMIS, the staff person would simply select male instead of both male and transgender. When enrolling a client who already has a record in HMIS, verify that gender information is complete and accurate and correct it if it is not. Clients may report different gender identities or present different gender expressions at different projects within the same COC. This may be because their gender identity has changed or because they experience a different sense of safety at different projects. If staff are working with a client who reports a gender identity that differs from the HMIS record, staff should ensure that the client understands and is comfortable with their information being updated across all projects prior to making any changes. Clients decide which projects they will disclose potentially sensitive information. Project staff should enter the self-reported information as directed by the client. The options include female, male, a gender that is not singularly female or male, transgender, questioning, client doesn't know, or client refused. I'm going to throw it over to Anton for program-specific data elements.
Hey everybody, Anton here. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me out there. All right, I love it, I love it. Next, we'll be discussing the items that have been revised and added in the program-specific data elements. Program-specific data elements provide information about the characteristics of clients, the services that are provided, and the client outcomes. The changes in the program-specific data are minor and will not change overall data collection processes. Next slide, please. Element 4.09, mental health disorder. Mental health problem has been revised to mental health disorder throughout, as mental health problem is outdated language. Element 4.10, substance use disorder. Substance abuse problem has been revised to substance use disorder, as substance abuse problem is outdated language. For element 4.20, coordinated entry event. The coordinated entry event element is designed to capture key referral and placement events, as well as the results of those events. This element helps communities understand the events that go into the desired and undesired results achieved through the coordinated entry system. This data element is intended to standardize data collection on core components of coordinated entry like access, assessment, referral, and prioritization. For the fiscal year 2022 HMIS data standards revision, 3 new referral events have been added to include: number 1, referral to emergency assistance, flex fund, furniture assistance; 2, referral to emergency housing voucher; 3, referral to housing stability voucher. Next slide, please, Ara. Next, we'll talk about the federal partner program data element changes. To meet the requirements for federally funded programs using HMIS, additional elements are required for different funding sources. These elements may change over time during a specific project stay or during a client's overall homelessness. The new data standard changes affect 4 of the 5 federal partner programs, including COC, HAPWA, which is Housing Opportunities for Persons with AIDS, RHY, which is Runaway and Homeless Youth, and VA, Veterans Affairs. As there are not any RHY projects in our HMIS implementation, we will not be covering these areas today, but we'll go over the other funding type changes. Next slide, please, Ara. So for federal partner program elements in the COC, there are 3 new data elements to be collected for permanent supported housing projects only. These new data elements are well-being, moving on assistance, and youth education status. Next slide, please, Ara. Element C1, well-being. Well-being is a new data element added in the fiscal year 2022 data standards revision. This element is to be collected for all head of households enrolled in permanent supportive housing projects at project start, annual assessment, and project exit. The purpose of this data element is to better understand a person's personal well-being during their homelessness experience. The 4 questions related to this data element are: client perceives their life has value and worth. Client perceives that they have support from others who will listen to problems. Client perceives they have a tendency to bounce back after hard times. Client's frequency of feeling nervous, tense, worried, frustrated, or afraid. Next slide, please, Zara. Moving on to data element C2, moving on assistance. Moving on enables those individuals and families that are willing and able to graduate from PSH to do so by providing them with a sustainable and affordable housing option through mainstream systems, while also providing them with the service connections they need to have continued housing success. This element is a new element to be collected to show the type of moving on assistance that has been provided to the clients graduating from PSH programs. These types of moving on assistance are subsidized housing application assistance, financial assistance for moving on, such as security deposit, moving expenses, non-financial assistance for moving on, such as housing navigation or transition report, housing referral and placement, and other in which you will specify. Next slide, please, Zara. Thank you. Now on to data element C3, youth education status. Youth education status is a new data element to be collected for all head of households enrolled in a YHDP, which is a youth homelessness demonstration program project at project start and project exit. It asks the current school enrollment and attendance, the most recent education status, and the current educational status. Next slide, please, Zara. Thank you. Data element R7, general health status. This element has been a requirement for HUD, VASH, and RHY funded projects only. However, with the fiscal year 2022 update, HUD is now requiring this element for all head of households enrolled in PSH to collect this element at project start and exit. Next slide, please, Zara. Thank you. Now we'll move on to federal partner data elements for HOPWA. There are 3 updates for HOPWA funded projects. For data element W1, services provided, substance abuse services / treatment was revised to substance use disorder services / treatment, as substance abuse is outdated language. For data element W3, medical assistance, the option for receiving Ryan White funded medical or dental assistance was added. Data element W6, prescribed antiretroviral, is a new element. This element is to be collected at project start, annual assessments, and project exit. This element will be required for all household members with HIV and AIDS. This is a yes or no response to whether antiretroviral medications have been prescribed.
Hey, Anton, we can't, Ara, we can't see the screen right now because I was playing around with something. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I noticed that. We'll take just a second for Ara to get the screens back up.
Sorry about that.
Can we go back just one slide for the, go back one slide, please, Ara. So since we cut out during the antiretroviral, I'll go over that again just so everybody's clear on that point. So the third new change, or the new element in HOPWA funded programs, is data element W6, which is prescribed antiretroviral. It's a new element, and it's supposed to be collected at project start, annual assessment, and project exit. This element will be required for all household members with HIV and AIDS. This question is a yes or no response to whether antiretroviral medications have been prescribed. All right, now we can move on to the VA-funded federal partner programs. There are 2 changes to data elements for projects receiving VA funding. They include the financial assistance data element and the homelessness prevention targeting criteria data element. Next slide, please, Zara. Thank you. There we go. So for data element V3, financial assistance, there are 2 specific changes. The element used to have 2 specific options for general housing stability assistance or emergency supplies and general housing stability assistance other. These have now been merged to general housing stability assistance. Food assistance option has also been added as a response. Next slide, please, Aaron. For the data element V7, which is homelessness prevention targeting criteria, data element V7 has been fully revised from the fiscal year 2020 data standards version. The element was renamed to remove SSVF from the title, as it may become applicable to other projects in the future. Changes to this data element were made to improve validity and reliability results. The data for this element will be collected at project start for those enrolled in a homelessness prevention SSVF VA project. As you will see, the is homelessness prevention targeting screener required field is new and requires a yes or no response. Depending on the answer to this question will determine whether the remaining questions need to be collected. If the response is no, the remaining pieces of this element are not needed. If the response is yes, then they should be collected at entry. And just as a reminder, all agencies participating in HMIS must ask clients for the appropriate data elements. It is your responsibility to ask for the information when collecting data. Clients are not obligated to answer to receive services. However, it is up to us to ask the questions. And with that, I will kick it back over to Ara for anybody who has any remaining questions.
Thanks, Anton, and I'm gonna share my webcam again. So that's the end of our formal slides. I didn't see any questions pop up on the chat, but feel free to drop any questions that you might have around the material that we presented, or feel free to come off mute if you do have any specific questions. So does anyone have any questions, feedback, concerns regarding the material that was presented today?
I had a question. We don't do HOPWA funds, but I had a question about the recording of whether somebody's been given antiviral medication. Is that a HIPAA issue? Can we publish that without a post that without a HIPAA release?
So Teresa, the way that HOPWA projects are set up, that information would not be visible to other providers in the community. It would only be visible to HOPWA providers. That's actually the way that they're set up now. And somebody on my team, Kavita, could probably speak to it in a little bit more detail because she's been so heavily involved in it and everything. But there are restrictions on what people can see with the HOPWA piece.
Thank you.
Yes, Teresa, any information that HOPWA providers are going to collect, it'll not be shared with any other provider beyond HOPWA. But yes, again, if that is a piece that we need to collect and the client will give the information, we do have clients who refuse. So it's all up to the client how they give, but any information that will be on that project is just for that project and not for anyone else. At least that's how it's said.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that question. Any other questions regarding the presentation?
Hey y'all, it's Lydia. You can't see me. I really am into these data changes and the changing it from mental health problem to disorder and substance use disorder. That's lovely.
Thanks, Lydia, for that feedback. And I'm just reading Kiki Cody, your question in the chat. So would program-specific changes apply to other sections of HCIS, such as the beginning HUD assessment? And again, for example, in the HUD assessment, it refers to mental health related disability as mental health problem. Currently, there are changes being made to change it to mental health disorder. In the program-specific section, will the change on the HUD assessment? Will there be a change in the HUD assessment as well, is what I'm gathering from your question, Kiki? And yes, the answer is we're aligning all of our assessments to reflect the changes that are coming down the pipeline with the FY 2022 data standards. Okay. Another question that was asked in the chat was from Kate Woodward. What would be the correct way to record someone who is Middle Eastern? We've had some difficulty in the past with folks identifying where they fit. And I might bump this over to Marissa since she went over race and ethnicity. My apologies. But it's truly providing the question of where the individual most identifies with, and really giving them the options of what they might feel fits their specific identity, if that makes sense. So it's really presenting all of the options and allowing the individual to pick from those options. Am I getting to that answer, HCIS folks? Does anyone else have any other feedback?
I think that's the most important. I think that probably part of this question is, there are a lot of, so if a person is from the Middle East, they might not identify themselves as Asian or they might not identify themselves as white. So I think that it's just the question is, or the impetus for us as data collectors is just to provide all the options and then see how people self-identify, and then record it that way. And again, like if someone truly doesn't know, you can just put that they don't know because, you know, cultural differences or things like that.
And this is Sam. I think from client doesn't know can also be used as none of the other options fit. So the description that HUD gives for client doesn't know isn't just that they just don't know what their race is, but they don't know what it is from the other 5 options. So you can use that as an option for those who don't fit in one of the other boxes.
Okay, great questions. Thank you all. I'm not seeing any other questions jumping out in the chat. But again, feel free to come off mute and ask your question to the team. Team, I'm also gathering our questions just in case we want to create like some sort of FAQ document for end users to be able to access in the future. All right, I'm still seeing no other questions being added to the chat. So I'll pose this to the HCIS team. Are we okay giving folks about an hour back of their time and potentially sticking around in case anyone has questions that they might want to ask that they think of later on? I'm not sure what you all are thinking. But I think everyone could use more time, right?
Hey, Anton here. I'm fine with sticking around.
And if anyone doesn't feel comfortable asking here, you can always reach out to your HMIS lead and they are happy to answer any questions outside of this. And as these new elements and new changes come into the system after October 1st, we will be providing technical assistance and any further questions ongoing. So you know the contacts to reach out. If you don't, we'll make sure that you get it. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and we will send around the recorded presentation. All right, looks like a question came in from Sharon about whether or not we ought to keep asking repeat clients and callers to verify.
Yeah, I actually just scrolled down to that one. So I would say you should that really should be up to how your COC is operating their coordinated entry, but I do believe that asking about race, if you're able to verify it initially, should be fine, unless you know, you want to verify unless something largely changes from the client's first call to their second call. I feel that it would probably just be a simple, like, you know, you've described to us some of this information before. I just want to verify that this is still correct, and then, you know, sort of list what they had repeated before, and if folks want to change any answers, give them the option to, and also give them the options that are available to change their answer to. Does that make sense? And again, I don't know if other folks on this call, on the HIS team, feel differently.
No, and I think you're right, Ara. It kind of depends on your COC and kind of where people fit in. Sharon works for the Homeless Connection Line, so they are talking to people over and over again. So it's a little bit different situation than somebody talking to one person, then 6 months later talking to somebody else. It's like probably somebody that has spoken to somebody on the Homeless Connection Line the week before, and race is one of those things, if you've gotten complete answers, that's not going to change. So I agree, maybe a quick verification or something like that. Gender identification is something that can change. So I do think that it can change because it changes for the person, or it changes for their comfort with sharing that information with somebody. So I do think that, if somebody called you yesterday and they call you today, I wouldn't ask again. But, if it's a week later, or, some period of time has gone by, I do think that it's worth asking some of those questions again.
Was that helpful, Sharon? Did that provide some insight, or did you have other questions around that piece?
Yeah, thank you. Sometimes we get the answers where folks say that they don't know how they identify. So in cases like that, I was wondering if at that point we could re-ask that question to get verification.
And I think that's perfectly fine. Margot, sorry, did you come off mute?
Oh, no, no, I agree.
And again, it's that option of if they don't answer, we don't know that they don't know initially. Again, sort of going back to Sam's point earlier, that it's just maybe they don't fit in the options that were presented, but continuing to present these options to the client and then allowing them to self-identify is really what I believe HUD is going for with these data changes. So it would be to your benefit that even if they answer that they don't know initially, is to verify that information with them if they do call again, and let them know, you had answered this question that you didn't know before, but I just wanted to see if this was still correct. Do you need me to walk you through the options again? It might take a little bit of time, might feel a little tedious, but it's still giving the clients the options to self-identify in the best manner possible. Does that make sense?
Sure, thanks a lot.
Oh, I was going to say that I think related to this, Kavita and I, maybe Kavita could talk to this a little bit, but we've come across like duplicate clients that if we have a person who has like their gender identity has changed, and so they might have entered HMIS with a birth name that is now a dead name, and then they're now using a different name, like things like that. I guess the point is like, don't be afraid to reach out with client merges, but also I guess Kavita, if you could speak to like, what would you do if someone was calling in and saying like, I do have, I have been served by X project or whatever, but I go by this name now, and I use like, identify as this now. Do we go ahead and change the name on the profile, or?
Yes, I think the name would have to be changed on file, and the alias is where the previous name, they can put in the previous name in the alias. And if you all are into writing notes, just put in a note saying that the client had called saying that they have their name changed, and right now this is what it is, so it's updated in file, so that if there are duplicates for any reason, sometimes the note helps. The minute you read it, you're like, oh, okay, we can go ahead with the merge. So notes, and if there are two different names, just put it in the alias, and that's all that would be needed, because it doesn't make sense creating two different client IDs for the same person who's being served, for the same reason. Multiple, I don't think we need multiple client IDs in there. So just put in an alias and that should be helpful.
Thanks, Kavita.
So still scouring the chat, but not seeing any additional questions. Are you all getting any questions directly to the presenters? So Anton, Sam, Margot, Marissa, are you all getting any questions